Hey guys, tonight we wander into the golden sands of Egypt, where time itself feels like it has yawned, stretched, and then decided to lie back down for another nap. You're not here for the blockbuster version with gods hurling lightning bolts, dramatic music, and intense CGI crocodiles. No, you're here for the sleepy side of myths. The side where everything unfolds so slowly, you probably won't survive this, awake. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Seriously, don't fake it. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and what time it is for you right now. It's always kind of magical to see how many corners of the world drift off together under the same quiet sky. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing by the Nile at night. The water glides with a laziness that almost mirrors your own heartbeat, steady and unhurried. The moonlight paints silver ripples across its surface, and somewhere in the reeds, a frog croaks once and then seems to give up halfway through the thought. The air is warm, heavy with that faint desert dust that hangs even after sundown, and as you breathe in, you imagine yourself centuries ago, long before streetlights, before phones, before anything except the stars overhead. Your feet sink slightly into the sand at the river's edge. It's cool down here, not scorching the way it is in the daytime. You can almost picture the river as a living thing, a sleepy serpent curling between banks of palm trees. The Egyptians certainly thought so. They treated the Nile like a god in its own right. Not a dramatic god with thunder and fury, but a patient, consistent one. It flooded, it retreated, it gave life, it demanded respect. Year after year, like a metronome, it just kept going. And here you are, feeling that same rhythm, as though you've been dropped into a story that has been told on repeat for thousands of years. You wander further. Across the water, small clay lamps flicker from mud brick houses. They're so faint that they could almost be fireflies, barely holding their glow against the immensity of the night. Somewhere, a priest might be humming a hymn to Ra, the sun god, but right now Ra is asleep, tucked beneath the horizon, waiting for his bark, the solar boat, to rise again come morning. You imagine him, not in a hurry, not fierce, but dozing in the underworld, maybe with one golden eye half open, muttering something about alarm clocks. The sand crunches beneath your steps. It's not the racing gallop of horses, not the thunder of armies, just your soft, steady pace. You brush against papyrus stalks, hear the faint rustle, and then, silence again. That's the thing about Egypt at night. It can be so quiet, the quiet almost feels heavy, like a blanket. Even the gods seem to whisper here, careful not to wake anyone. You pause, gazing up. The sky is crowded with stars. Not a few scattered points, but an overwhelming sea of light. Ancient Egyptians used to see the goddess Nut stretched across the heavens, her body arching in a cosmic backbend, swallowing the sun each evening and birthing it each morning. You tilt your head back and imagine it. A giant goddess arcing overhead, yawning as she settles into position, maybe a little bored from doing the same thing every single night since forever. Scholars still argue whether Nut was painted on tomb ceilings as a literal map of the cosmos or just a spiritual metaphor. Either way, when you look up right now, you can see why they thought of the sky as alive. It's not just twinkling, it's moving, stretching, breathing, like it might roll over and pull the blanket of clouds tighter. A breeze slips past you, carrying the smell of damp earth, water lilies, and faint incense from some far-off shrine. You follow it, not with urgency, but with that dreamy wandering where you don't mind if you ever arrive. You catch yourself trailing your hand through the air, almost like you're imitating the movement of Ra's sun boat across the sky. And there's a strange comfort in knowing the myths weren't always about grand battles. Sometimes, they were about routine. Every night, the sun descended. Every morning, it returned. Every year, the Nile rose and receded. Predictable, steady, cyclical. The gods weren't just there for drama, they were there to explain why things happened like clockwork. Imagine if every sunrise was treated not with dread but with a shrug. Yep, Ra's back, same as always. It's almost boring, but boring in the most reassuring way. You step further from the riverbank and notice the sand cooling even more beneath your toes. The dunes roll like waves frozen in time. The desert is vast, and yet it feels intimate when the night presses in. Your eyelids start to feel the same weight that presses down on the horizon, drooping as though mimicking the slow bow of palm fronds. Somewhere in the distance, a temple rises, half in shadow, half in moonlight. The pillars are carved with hieroglyphs, their stories etched in careful detail, but at this distance, you can't make out the words. They just look like lines drifting, as if the stone itself is mumbling in its sleep. You picture scribes sitting by oil lamps, copying stories onto papyrus, yawning, stretching, rolling their eyes at yet another, and then Ra did this passage. It's the kind of work that keeps myths alive, not through fire or fury, but through the simple act of writing things down, over and over. The night deepens, and you realize the sound of the river has become like background music, soft, repetitive, hypnotic. The Nile doesn't rush. It doesn't crash like an ocean. It sighs. It hums. It continues with the kind of patience only eternity can manage. If you stand here long enough, you'll almost feel like the water is whispering to you, retelling stories it has carried for millennia, stories that never need to hurry because they know they'll be retold tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. Your body sways a little, lulled by the rhythm of the night. Maybe the gods are watching, maybe not. Maybe the only eyes on you are the countless stars burning with quiet indifference. Either way, you're part of it now, part of the slow, sleepy myth of Egypt. The sand stretches in every direction, rolling like golden waves frozen mid-motion. You wander forward, your footsteps leaving shallow imprints that the night breeze immediately begins to erase. There's something almost soothing about how temporary they are, as if the desert is saying, "Don't worry, nothing you do here needs to last." The dunes are patient, endlessly reshaping themselves, shifting so slowly you'd barely notice unless you came back centuries later. The air is cooler now, touched by the faintest whisper of wind, but it carries warmth stored from the day. Each grain of sand you brush with your fingertips seems to radiate a tired glow, like embers long after the fire has burned out. Above, the stars remain steadfast, tiny lanterns hung carelessly across the sky by a hand that didn't bother arranging them neatly. You keep walking, though you don't feel in any rush to reach anywhere. The desert has that effect. It doesn't promise destinations, only stretches of space that blur together until you forget how far you've come. You glance back once and already the Nile feels like a memory, tucked safely behind you. In front of you, endless sands beckon, quiet and unbothered. This is the realm where gods were imagined not as explosions of chaos but as whispers folded into the landscape. When the wind sighs, you can almost believe it's a voice. Egyptians often told stories of the desert being haunted by spirits and gods, each dune hiding something. But not every tale was terrifying. Some were just gentle reminders that the world was alive, even when it looked empty. You pause at the crest of a hill of sand, balancing carefully so you don't slide down. From up here, you see the horizon ripple like a mirage, though you know it's only the air, still hot from the day's sun. You breathe slowly, and the silence presses into you until you can hear your own pulse. It matches the rhythm of your steps, the rhythm of the dunes, the rhythm of the universe saying, relax. Slow down. Oddly enough, you think about how travelers would once cross these deserts on foot or camel, tracing caravan routes that felt endless. The thought itself makes you sleepy, the sheer monotony of it. Imagine staring at the same rolling sand for days, weeks, months, broken only by the sight of a distant oasis or the silhouette of another weary traveler. Scholars still argue whether these desert treks inspired certain Egyptian myths about gods wandering the horizons, searching for something eternal. Maybe the gods were just stand-ins for tired humans trudging along under the same heavy sky. You let your fingers sift through the sand at your feet. It pours like water, flowing between your hands, and for a moment you imagine it as tiny golden seconds slipping by. Not dramatic, not rushing, just steady. Time itself feels slower here, stretched thin across the endless horizon. The ancients knew this feeling too. The desert was timeless, indifferent, and yet it held a quiet allure. In the distance, a shape looms. At first, you think it's another dune, but no, the edges are too sharp. It's a ruined structure, perhaps a half-buried shrine or the remains of a marker once used to guide travelers. You wander closer, sand shifting under your steps. The structure is simple. A few broken stones stacked in a way that suggests it once meant something important. Now it just sits there, like an exhausted traveler who decided to stop and never get up again. You touch the stones. They're warm, even in the night air, as though they've been storing sunlight all day. You imagine priests once stood here, maybe lighting a small fire, whispering chants to guide the souls of the lost. Now, there's nothing but you and the whisper of wind slipping through cracks. It's the kind of ruin that doesn't beg to be remembered. It just exists, quietly, like an old man content to sit on his porch and watch the world pass by. The sand shifts again, and you hear a faint hiss. For a second, you freeze, imagining a cobra winding past, one of the creatures sacred to the goddess Wadjet. But when you look, there's nothing, just sand tumbling down the side of the dune. Still, it reminds you of how Egyptians often saw snakes as guardians, protectors, and sometimes even guides to hidden truths. Strange, really, how something so dangerous could also be so revered. Perhaps that's the secret of the desert too. Dangerous if rushed, but protective if respected. You step back from the stones and glance up once more. The sky hasn't changed. Still endless, still watching. It's comforting in its sameness. You notice a faint band of light arching across, the Milky Way shimmering like spilled flour. Egyptians saw this too, night after night, and built their myths around it. To them, it was not just stars but a path for souls, a celestial river mirroring the Nile below. The desert is full of those reflections. Every ripple of sand echoes the river's waves. Every star above mirrors a grain of sand below. It's like standing between two infinite seas, one glittering, one golden. And you, caught in the middle, are so small, so temporary, yet so strangely calm. You sit down at last, feeling the sand cradle you like a giant pillow. The grains shift slightly, filling the spaces around your body, holding you in place. The breeze continues its quiet song, never hurrying, never stopping. And for a moment, it feels as though you're part of the dunes themselves, just another shape the desert carries for a while before smoothing away again. You linger on the dune's crest, your body heavy with the calm of the desert, when suddenly your gaze drifts back toward the east. It's still dark, but there's a faint glow teasing the horizon. Not dawn yet, No, it's something older, something slower. You imagine the solar bark of Ra, that legendary sun boat, preparing for its nightly cruise through the underworld. According to myth, Ra doesn't just vanish when the sun sets. He steps aboard his golden vessel and sails beneath the earth, battling serpents and shadows until morning. But in this version you're watching, there's no grand clash, no fireworks. Instead, you picture Ra leaning against the side of the boat, yawning, his crown slipping forward like a tired commuter on the world's longest train ride. The boat glides, not with urgency, but with the patience of someone who knows tomorrow is guaranteed. The water under the earth is dark, sluggish, more like molasses than a rushing river. You imagine yourself stowing away on that bark, sitting quietly in the corner as the god of the sun half-heartedly waves away cosmic threats. An enormous serpent, Apophis, rises from the depths, but instead of a terrifying battle, Ra just flicks his wrist as if swatting at a mosquito, then leans back and closes his eyes again. Egyptians told this story night after night, explaining why the sun returned without fail. To them, it wasn't just light, it was reassurance. You can almost hear their voices, ancient storytellers gathered by lamplight, repeating the tale like a bedtime ritual. Scholars still argue whether these nightly journeys were meant as literal cosmology or just comforting allegory, but as you watch Ra's boat slide lazily across the underworld's waters, you realize it doesn't matter. Either way, the point is the same. Things keep moving. Slowly, predictably, almost boringly. The glow on the horizon brightens slightly, a subtle reminder that morning will eventually arrive. But for now, the night belongs to Ra's drowsy voyage. You trace the movement with your eyes, imagining the golden hull cutting silently through invisible currents. No sound of oars, no creak of wood, just the hush of eternity carrying him forward. Oddly enough, you feel comforted by the monotony. It's like watching the same movie for the 100th time, knowing every line before it's spoken, and loving it precisely because of that. Ra always sails. Apophis always loses. The sun always returns. There's no suspense, no plot twist, just the reassurance of a myth that behaves like a well-worn blanket. You lie back on the sand, tilting your head so the stars blur above you. You can almost picture them as tiny holes poked through a cosmic ceiling, each letting in a sliver of light from the world Ra is sailing through. Maybe his boat is gliding right beneath those pinpricks right now, brushing against the underside of the sky. The desert air shifts again, and you think about how many times this story has been told. Thousands of years, thousands of retellings, each priest or parent or wanderer describing the solar boat in their own words. Some would have made it grand, with detailed imagery of serpents and storms. But others, maybe, would have whispered it softly, letting their listeners drift off long before Ra finished his nightly trip. You glance back toward the ruined shrine you passed earlier. In your mind's eye, you imagine priests standing there long ago, chanting hymns to help Ra on his journey. The rhythm of their voices, steady and low, like a mantra, the god sails, the god endures, the god returns. A chant not meant to keep anyone awake, but to lull them into a state of calm certainty. Even now, you feel the weight of it pressing gently on your eyelids. Ra's journey is happening whether you watch or not. Whether you stay awake or not. You're just a passenger here, caught in the hum of an endless cycle. The glow deepens on the horizon, like the faintest ember. You know the story will continue long after you stop paying attention. The solar bark will rise, the sun will return, and Ra will stretch, dust off his crown, and pretend he didn't spend the entire night half asleep at the helm. And you, lying here on the dunes, realize you're doing the same. You don't need to stay alert. The story carries itself. The gods will handle the night, lazily but reliably. All you need to do is drift with them, letting your thoughts flow as slowly as that golden boat gliding beneath the world. The night deepens around you, and the stars above seem to lean closer, crowding into your vision as though eager to remind you that they, too, are part of this endless Egyptian story. Your gaze drifts upward until you can almost feel your neck stiffen from staring too long. And then, there she is. Nut, the sky goddess, her body stretching across the heavens in one impossibly slow arch. She isn't the kind of goddess who rushes. No lightning bolts, no sudden appearances. Nut is patient, stretched thin like the sky itself, painted from horizon to horizon. You imagine her arms and legs touching the earth, her body bending like a great canopy. Her skin is dark, studded with stars, and each tiny flicker overhead feels like the sparkle of a jewel set into her vast frame. According to myth, every evening she swallows the sun, pulling it into her endless stomach, and every morning, she gives birth to it again. It's a strange image if you think about it too much. A goddess eating and birthing the sun daily, like a cosmic routine. But here, under this sky, it feels less like drama and more like housekeeping. Nut just is what she does. No rush, no fuss. The cycle goes on, endlessly predictable. You tilt your head, imagining her face peeking over the horizon, tired but unbothered, sighing as she swallows the glowing orb. Maybe she even mutters something about how repetitive this job is, like a cashier scanning the same item over and over. Yet, in that repetition, there's comfort. The sun sets. The sun rises. Every single day. The Egyptians carved her on tomb ceilings, her long arched body spanning above the dead, a reminder that life was cyclical, that night didn't mean the end but simply a pause. Scholars still argue whether Nut's arch was meant to be read as a literal cosmological map or a symbolic reassurance, but honestly, lying here, you don't care which one it was. You only know that the stars above don't feel random. They feel arranged, purposeful, even if the purpose is simply to lull you into calm. A breeze drifts across your skin, and you imagine it is Nut's breath, steady and slow. The same air that once touched pyramids, temples, and countless sleepers before you. You picture people lying under this same arch thousands of years ago, telling each other, "Don't worry, Nut has us covered." And in a way, she still does. There's something oddly maternal in the thought. The sky isn't just an empty canvas, it's a body, a guardian, an endless blanket tucked around the earth. Each twinkle of starlight is like the stitch of a seam, holding the fabric of night together. And you, a tiny speck beneath it all, feel safer knowing someone, or something, is doing the cosmic heavy lifting. You trace constellations lazily with your finger in the air. The familiar ones blur into the unfamiliar. It doesn't matter if you can't tell Orion from Osiris, or the Big Dipper from some ancient Egyptian star map. What matters is the act itself, the slow scanning of the heavens, your eyes heavy but still wandering. Odd details float through your mind. Did you know some myths said Nut and her brother Jeb, the earth god, had to be separated by Shu, the god of air, because they couldn't stop embracing? That's why the sky is up there and the earth is down here. You imagine Shu standing like an awkward chaperone, arms stretched forever, sighing about how exhausting it is to keep siblings apart for eternity. The image makes you smirk, but then it fades into the rhythm of the myth, which, like everything else here, loops endlessly. The desert is so quiet that you can almost hear the hum of the stars. Not literally, but in the way silence sometimes feels like sound. You let your breathing match it. Slow in, slower out, until your chest rises and falls in sync with the imagined heartbeat of the sky. Nut arches above, unblinking, unhurried. Somewhere in her belly, the sun is tucked away, glowing faintly, waiting for its turn to shine again. You don't need to see it. You don't even need to stay awake for its return. The goddess will handle that part. You only need to lie here, to feel the vast stretch of her presence, and to let the predictability of her cycle wash over you like a lullaby. And so, under her eternal arch, you do exactly that. You drift, weightless, as though her star-studded arms themselves are cradling you into the next dream. The stars are still glittering above you, but your attention drifts downward now, toward the darker shapes near the riverbanks. The Nile is calm, quiet, almost pretending to sleep, but somewhere in its waters, in the shadows that slide beneath the reeds, you catch yourself thinking of crocodiles. And once you think of crocodiles, you can't help but think of Sobek. Sobek isn't like Ra or Nut or Osiris. He's not lofty or poetic. He's practical, in a weird way. Half man, half crocodile, Sobek embodies the blunt reality of Egyptian life. Crocodiles were everywhere, and they were terrifying. Imagine going for a peaceful swim and realizing you're basically an appetizer. Instead of pretending they didn't exist, the Egyptians leaned into it. They made Sobek a god, hoping he'd keep his scaly children from snacking on people. You picture him now. The body of a man, standing broad-shouldered on the shore, but with that unmistakable crocodile head, snout long, teeth sharp, eyes half closed in the kind of expression only reptiles can pull off. And instead of roaring, he yawns. Slowly, lazily. Because even crocodile gods have long nights. You wander closer to the water's edge, imagining Sobek lounging in the shallows, half submerged, only his ridged back breaking the surface. The moonlight glints off the water, catching the tips of his teeth. He doesn't move fast. He doesn't need to. Crocodiles never rush. They wait. They float. They lull you into thinking they're harmless until they suddenly aren't. But tonight, there's no sudden snap. No splashing chaos. Just the slow blink of reptilian eyes and the gentle push of water as Sobek shifts, settling in as though preparing for his own nap. Oddly enough, the Egyptians didn't just fear him, they respected him. Sobek was tied to fertility, strength, even protection. His temples often sat close to crocodile-filled waters. Priests would feed the creatures, sometimes even mummify them, treating them as sacred pets. Imagine visiting a temple where dozens of crocodiles lounged in pools, bellies full, tails swishing lazily. It's not exactly a relaxing thought, but the sheer strangeness of it makes you smile. Scholars still argue whether the crocodiles were actually tamed or just bribed with food. Either way, it worked. People believed Sobek kept them safe. You trail your hand in the river, watching ripples expand slowly across the surface. They distort the reflection of the stars above, turning the goddess Nut into a shimmering blur. Maybe Sobek is watching those ripples too, patient as ever. The god of crocodiles doesn't need to say anything. His very presence is enough. And yet, there's a sleepy humor in him. Imagine a deity whose job is to be half terrifying, half essential. Imagine him trying to hold a conversation with Ra about solar boats and cosmic serpents. Sobek would probably just grunt, "Sure, but have you seen my teeth?" Before sinking back into the water. You lean back, hearing the gentle lap of the river. The sound is repetitive, like a lullaby hummed by someone too tired to remember all the words. The reeds sway, and a heron lifts slowly from the shallows, its wings catching the silver light as it drifts upward into the night. The movement is so graceful, so unhurried, that it feels like part of the myth itself. Sobek remains, a shadow in the water, steady and patient. You realize he isn't here to scare you. Not tonight. He's here to remind you of balance, the way even the most fearsome creatures can be woven into the gentle rhythm of existence. Crocodiles don't always leap. Sometimes they just float. And gods, too, sometimes just wait. You close your eyes, the sound of water and the imagined weight of Sobek's gaze combining into something oddly comforting. The danger is still there, yes, but muted, softened by the endless hum of the Nile. You feel safe enough to drift, knowing that even the crocodile god has slowed down for the night. You wander further along the Nile's edge, leaving the lazy ripples of Sobek behind, until the reeds thin out and the sand stretches wider again. The air grows stiller, heavier, as though the world itself is holding its breath. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a story has been looping for ages, one that always begins the same way: Isis searching for Osiris. You feel the weight of her presence even before you imagine her. Isis isn't rushing. None of the gods in these myths ever do, not really. Instead, she moves with the slow determination of someone who knows the ending but must walk through every step anyway. Her figure drifts through your mind's eye, tall, serene, crowned with a throne-shaped headdress. She carries herself with quiet patience, though you can sense the ache of her eternal task. Osiris, her husband, her brother, her king, had been torn apart by Set, scattered across Egypt. And Isis, night after night, searches for him. She finds a piece here, a fragment there, as though the land itself has become a puzzle box. You picture her walking along the very sands beneath your feet, her fingers brushing through the dunes, hoping to find one more piece of the man she loved. The Nile reflects her movements, rippling softly. You imagine her robes dragging just above the water, the hem dusted with golden grains of sand. She doesn't complain, doesn't falter. She just keeps moving, slow and steady, as though the journey is more important than the completion. The story itself is tragic, of course, but here, under the sleepy hum of the night, it feels oddly soothing. The search is never frantic. It's methodical, almost meditative. Isis bends, picks up, sighs, and keeps walking. Somewhere a jackal calls, its cry echoing over the dunes, but even that sound fades into the background, just another layer of the night. And you think, perhaps the myth was never about grief alone, but about persistence. About the quiet act of not giving up, even when the task seems endless. There's a rhythm to it, like the endless rise and fall of the Nile. Scholars still argue whether the myth of Isis and Osiris was meant purely as religious drama or whether it symbolized the annual cycles of life, death, and renewal tied to the river. To the people who told it, though, the meaning may not have mattered. The story itself was enough, an endless reminder that searching, even slowly, always brings you closer to something. You close your eyes for a moment and picture Isis humming as she works, a low tune, half a lullaby, half a prayer. Her voice blends with the rustle of palm fronds overhead, with the steady pulse of the river, until the whole desert feels like it's vibrating with her determination. She finds one piece, presses it to her chest, and whispers Osiris's name, not in desperation, but in the tone of someone certain she'll find the rest, even if it takes 1,000 years. Odd details from the myth float into your thoughts. How Isis used her magic to bring Osiris back to life just long enough to conceive Horus, their son. How she shielded Horus as a child, hiding him from Set's fury. And yet, despite all the drama, what lingers is the image of her wandering, collecting, gathering. Piece after piece. Night after night. You feel yourself walking alongside her. Not helping exactly, but keeping her company in the long silence. She doesn't look at you, but you sense she knows you're there. Maybe she appreciates the quiet footsteps beside hers, the reminder that she isn't entirely alone in her endless task. Eventually, she stops by the riverbank, kneeling in the sand. She lifts something small, a fragment, indistinct in the dim moonlight. She cradles it, whispers again, and then places it carefully into a bundle she carries. Another piece. Another step forward. The night stretches on. The stars overhead watch without comment, nut arching above as Isis continues her path. The rhythm of her search matches your own breathing now, steady, even, unhurried. And in that rhythm, you realize the truth of this story. It's less about tragedy and more about patience. The kind of patience that lulls you into stillness, the kind of patience that makes your eyelids grow heavier with each step. So you follow her a little longer, until the sands blur into shadows, until even Isis herself becomes another shape fading into the night, her search continuing long after you've drifted into dreams. The night carries you deeper into Egypt's silence, and though Isis drifts away into the dunes, her story lingers, pulling you toward Osiris himself. You can almost feel him beneath your feet, not gone, not entirely, but resting somewhere under the Nile's flowing currents. Osiris isn't a god of spectacle. He doesn't burst into the scene with thunder or lightning. No, he waits. Patient, quiet, almost too quiet. In myth, after his brother Set betrayed him, Osiris became lord of the underworld, ruler of the dead, and guardian of renewal. But here, in the stillness of night, he feels less like a fearsome king and more like a sleeper, resting in eternal calm, surrounded by the hum of water and sand. You walk slowly toward the river again, the air heavier now. The Nile's surface looks darker, thicker, like a curtain hiding what lies beneath. You kneel down and dip your fingers into the cool water, and for a fleeting moment, you imagine Osiris's hand brushing yours from below. Not to grab, not to startle, just a reminder. He is there. He has always been there. The Egyptians believed Osiris brought life through death, his body fertilizing the land itself. The Nile's annual floods were tied to him, its rich silt seen as his gift. Scholars still argue whether the flooding directly inspired his myth or whether the story emerged first, but either way, it doesn't matter. What matters is the image. Osiris resting beneath the waters, feeding the soil, ensuring the crops would grow. Even in death, he wasn't absent, he was present everywhere, quietly, steadily. You picture him now, lying in the cool earth, his skin a pale green in the dim light of the underworld, wrapped in linen, crowned with the tall white Atef crown flanked by ostrich feathers. His arms are crossed over his chest, holding crook and flail, not as weapons but as symbols of authority. And yet, despite the regal imagery, there's something deeply sleepy about him. His eyes are closed. His lips are calm. He doesn't need to move. Eternity is long, and Osiris has mastered the art of waiting. The thought is almost comforting. To know that beneath the Nile, beneath the sand, there's a figure who isn't plotting or raging but simply existing. Watching over things by being still. You imagine farmers thousands of years ago, looking out at the rising waters each year, whispering prayers of thanks to Osiris for returning once again, silently, predictably. The water laps gently at the bank, repeating the same soft sound again and again. It feels like Osiris's heartbeat, slow and steady, echoing through the land. You realize that he isn't just a god of death, he's a god of continuity. The promise that life continues, even after endings. A myth not of fear, but of reassurance. Odd details bubble up in your thoughts. How some versions of the myth claimed Osiris taught humans agriculture before his death, how he was the one who gave them bread and beer. Imagine that. The underworld god, patron not of fiery torment but of farming and brewing. Suddenly the king of the dead feels more like the friend who makes sure you're fed, even after he's gone. 10/9, 2:57 p.m. ASI. You let your hand drift through the Nile again, stirring the surface into lazy ripples. For a second, you imagine they're his fingers, tracing gentle patterns just beneath yours. No rush. No urgency. Just a reminder of presence. The moonlight spreads across the river, shimmering in broken fragments. Each flicker feels like a piece of Osiris scattered across the water, waiting patiently for Isis, or perhaps for you, to gather them again. The repetition of this thought, this story, is soothing. You realize why it lasted so long. Because it wasn't just a tale of loss, it was a cycle. One that mirrored the way the Nile would rise and fall, again and again, like a breath. And here you are, breathing with it. In, out. The Nile rises, the Nile falls. Osiris rests, Osiris rises. The rhythm is the same. You lean back on the sand, your body sinking into its cool embrace. Above you, Nut still arches across the sky. Around you, the desert hums with silence. Beneath you, Osiris dreams his eternal dream, green and still, waiting not for the end of the world but for the next dawn, the next flood, the next beginning. And somehow, knowing he's there, always there, makes you feel lighter, calmer. You don't need to stay awake. Osiris is keeping watch, in his own quiet, motionless way. You rise from the Nile's edge and step carefully across the soft sand, carrying Osiris's stillness with you. The night feels heavier now, like you've walked into the hushed corridors of a temple. The stars above are sharp, steady, and bright, tiny fires pinned across the vast belly of Nut. And there, among them, lingers the shadow of Set. You can almost sense him before you imagine him. The air feels pricklier, drier, as though it resents the river's cool flow. A faint wind stirs, not comforting but restless, tugging at the dunes as if trying to reshape them. That is Set. Forever unsettling, forever shifting. Set is the chaos in the myth of Isis and Osiris. The jealous brother who cut Osiris into pieces, who scattered him across the land. The god of storms, violence, deserts, the one who doesn't play by the rules. If Osiris is the calm rhythm of the Nile, Set is the sudden sandstorm that blinds you, the thunder that cracks without warning. You wander into his story the way you'd walk into a brewing storm. The air crackles faintly. Somewhere far off, the wind moans through broken rocks. And you imagine Set rising from the shadows, his head long-snouted and strange, part animal, part unknown. Scholars still argue what exactly he was meant to be. Donkey. Jackal. A mix of creatures nobody had seen. The uncertainty only adds to his unease. Yet, in this sleepy retelling, even Set isn't loud. His chaos drifts like a low rumble, a background sound that you can't quite shut out. He doesn't scream, he mutters. He doesn't charge, he lingers. A presence that makes you shift slightly, like a branch tapping against your window at night. You picture him dragging Osiris's coffin across the desert, the wood creaking, sand spilling around it. The image should be terrifying, but in this pace, it feels slow, almost drawn out, like a nightmare replaying in slow motion. You watch him scatter Osiris's body, each piece tossed into the sand with deliberate cruelty, but even here, in this gentle retelling, the act feels muted. The violence turns into repetition. One piece here, another piece there. A rhythm of destruction. And yet, you realize something. Set isn't purely evil. He's necessary. Without him, there is no cycle. Without his betrayal, Isis doesn't wander, Osiris doesn't rest beneath the Nile, Horus doesn't rise to challenge. The Egyptians, in their quiet wisdom, never painted him as just a villain. He was a force, dangerous, yes, but essential. The desert's harshness that balanced the river's generosity. The storm that cleared the stale air. Odd details cling to Set's myth. How later Egyptians sometimes associated him with foreign lands, with the edges of their world. How, at one point, he wasn't entirely hated, he was even worshipped for his strength, his ability to ward off threats. Imagine that. The god who murdered Osiris, the same god sailors prayed to when storms threatened their boats. Chaos and protection, rolled into one uneasy shape. You walk alongside his shadow now, through dunes that shift with every whisper of wind. The sand crunches beneath your feet, unsteady, unstable. But instead of panicking, you let the instability rock you into drowsiness. Set doesn't attack, he prowls. He lingers at the edge of your vision, a reminder that chaos never fully disappears, it just waits. The moonlight wavers, thin clouds drifting across its surface. The stars blink in and out, as if Set himself is tugging at the sky's fabric. You realize he's not here to frighten you tonight. He's here to remind you that balance includes discomfort. That peace doesn't exist without its shadow. That sleep feels sweeter because wakefulness can be restless. And so, instead of fighting him, you breathe with him. Let his stormy energy swirl at the edge of your awareness, then fade. Let the mutter of his chaos settle into the background hum. The dunes shift once more, the wind sighs, and Set, for now, drifts back into the shadows, leaving you to walk on, calm again. The desert settles again after Set's shadow fades, as if the land itself exhales in relief. You wander further, and the air grows cooler, touched with something faintly metallic, like bronze under moonlight. The sand stretches wide, but ahead you sense a different kind of presence, not chaotic, not grieving, but protective. Horus waits. He isn't a god of stillness, not like Osiris, and he isn't a storm, not like Set. Horus is sharper, steadier, the falcon who sees everything from above. You glance upward, and there he is, wings spread across the stars, eyes glowing like twin embers in the sky. One eye bright as the sun, the other pale as the moon. Horus's story begins where Isis's grief leaves off. He is the child she bore after piecing Osiris together, hidden and raised in secret marshes. You can almost hear the reeds swaying around you, their stalks creaking as if whispering lullabies. The goddess shielded him from Set's wrath, hiding him away until he was ready. And when he was, he rose, not with chaos, not with desperation, but with the focus of a hawk diving through the air. The air shifts around you. Even though you're walking through sand, you feel as though you're flying with him. The ground falls away, the dunes shrinking into ripples below. The Nile becomes a silver snake winding through the dark. And Horus, perched in your vision, beats his wings once, twice, steady and strong. His myth is all about struggle and justice, the long rivalry with Set. They fought for years, battles raging across desert and river, each claiming the throne of Egypt. But tonight, those battles don't feel loud. They feel like echoes, distant clashes softened by time. The thud of footsteps, the clash of spears, the cry of falcons overhead, all of it muffled, like a dream remembered through half-shut eyes. Scholars still argue whether Horus's victory represented a shift in royal power, or whether the myth simply reinforced the divine right of kings. To the Egyptians, though, Horus wasn't just a symbol of politics. He was the sky itself, watchful, enduring, patient. A presence that doesn't need to shout to remind you it's there. Odd details rise up. How Horus's eye, once torn out in battle with Set, was healed and became a powerful amulet, the Eye of Horus. A charm for protection, health, wholeness. You can almost feel it now, hovering before you in the dark, glowing faintly like a half-closed lantern. Its shape is strange but soothing, the spiral beneath the eye curling gently like a wave. It's not a weapon, it's a promise. You stand still in the sand, and the sky itself seems to lean down. Horus's gaze is vast, unblinking, but not harsh. It's the gaze of someone who sees every path, every shadow, every tiny movement, and accepts it. There is no judgment in his stare, only awareness. A falcon's calm patience, waiting, circling, watching. The desert wind brushes your face, cooler now, carrying a faint whistle that sounds almost like wings slicing the air. You follow it, letting Horus guide you. You don't feel small under his gaze. If anything, you feel protected, carried, as if those great wings could sweep down and wrap you in feathers, shielding you from every storm, every betrayal, every restless thought. Somewhere in the dunes, you hear the faint echo of Set's growl, but it doesn't matter. Horus is above him, beyond him, watching always. You breathe easier under that endless sky, knowing that whatever shadows linger, there is always a falcon circling overhead, steady as the moon, sharp as the dawn. And as you keep walking, you realize you don't even need to look up anymore. Horus is there, whether you see him or not. The eye follows, glowing quietly, protecting, until your steps blur into the night's rhythm once again. The night stretches on, and as Horus's watchful presence softens into the background, your path leads you back to the very heart of these myths, the throne of Egypt itself. For all their divine power, these gods didn't drift above in some unreachable realm. Their stories wound directly into the lives of pharaohs, into the rise and fall of kingdoms. And now, you step into that rhythm. The sand under your feet smooths, pressed flat, as though countless processions have marched this way. Torches flicker in your mind's eye, though the night remains silent. You're walking through a corridor of memory, stone walls rising on either side, etched with figures of falcons, crocodiles, and thrones. This is where myth meets rule, where kings wrap themselves in the stories of gods to claim their right to govern. The Egyptians believed their pharaohs were living Horuses, falcons on earth. When one died, he became Osiris, ruler of the underworld, while his son stepped into the role of Horus, carrying the sky's sharp eyes into a new reign. It was an endless cycle, one generation folding into the next. You can almost hear the ceremony of it. Priests chanting, drums slow and steady, the Nile whispering in the distance like an unbroken oath. It's soothing to think about. This continuity, this careful weaving of myth into daily life. No matter how chaotic things became, the throne was never empty. Osiris descended, Horus ascended, Set lingered at the edges, and Isis kept watch. The story was less about endings and more about transitions, about handing the baton forward through the ages. Scholars still argue how much of the pharaoh's power truly rested on these divine associations, but for the average person, it likely didn't matter. To them, the pharaoh wasn't just a man in gold and linen, he was a thread in a tapestry stretching back to the very dawn of creation. That thought alone must have been comforting. No matter who ruled, the pattern remained. Odd details surface again, almost dreamlike. Some coronation rituals included a Horus name, one of the royal titles each king received, linking him directly to the falcon god. Imagine being addressed not as a man but as a living piece of the sky. Or the Set festival, a rejuvenation ceremony after 30 years of rule, where the pharaoh would ritually renew his strength, proving he was still worthy of embodying Horus. 30 years, an eternity in ancient times. And yet they treated it as just a pause, a check-in with the gods. You keep walking, and the walls around you shimmer with hieroglyphs. They don't shout their meaning at you, they hum it quietly, shapes curling and straightening in soft repetition. Each falcon carved into stone seems to tilt its head toward you, patient, unblinking. Each crook and flail, each throne etched into the wall feels less like power and more like continuity. A sleepy rhythm of rulers coming and going, gods staying and watching. You imagine lying down in the middle of this corridor, stone cool beneath your back, carvings rising high above. The ceiling opens into stars, and for a moment, you can't tell where the pharaohs end and the gods begin. The line blurs, gently, lazily, until it all becomes one soft truth. That power, like myth, was always meant to flow, not to freeze. The torchlight flickers once more in your imagination, but it doesn't flare. It just dims, as though the ceremony has ended and everyone has gone home. The throne sits quiet, waiting for the next figure to step forward. And you, drifting in the silence, feel the same invitation. Not to rule, not to command, but to rest within that timeless rhythm, as if the whole of Egypt is whispering, someone always keeps watch, someone always carries the story forward. The air cools further as you step out of the imagined corridor of kings and into the vast openness of the desert again. The sand shifts under your feet, softer now, almost like ash, and the stars overhead glimmer with an extra sheen. Something stirs in the silence, not chaos, not grief, not rule, but magic. Subtle, persistent, ever present. And you realize you're walking into the presence of Thoth. He isn't a god of loud proclamations or fiery displays. Thoth is the quiet clerk of the cosmos, the one who writes everything down. His ibis head tilts as if listening, quill poised, eyes sharp and patient. You imagine him sitting at the edge of the Nile, legs folded neatly, papyrus spread across his lap, recording even this moment, your footsteps, your wandering thoughts, the hush of night folding around you. There's comfort in his presence. If Isis embodies love, Osiris renewal, Set chaos, and Horus protection, then Thoth is memory. He ensures none of it slips away, that every word, every breath, every fragment of myth remains. You don't need to remember everything yourself. He's already doing it for you. You picture him in the dim glow of oil lamps, scribes at his feet copying his wisdom, temple walls filling with the curl and stroke of hieroglyphs. Even now, you're surrounded by them. Spirals for water, falcons for Horus, eyes for protection. They float in the air, half seen, glowing faintly like fireflies. It feels like drifting through a library written directly onto the night. Scholars still argue whether Thoth's origins began purely as a moon god or whether his role as patron of writing and wisdom grew later, but here, under the stars, he feels whole. He doesn't need categories. He simply observes, writes, balances. He is the rhythm of thought itself, the pause between one breath and the next, where understanding crystallizes quietly. Odd details make him more vivid. How some myths claimed he created himself, stepping out of nothing with a voice that shaped reality. How he was said to have invented not just writing but time itself, keeping the universe on schedule like an eternal clockmaker. Imagine that. A god who not only watches the hours slip by but makes sure they exist in the first place. The desert around you seems to lean into his order. The stars stop twinkling so wildly, they hang steady, measured. The sand's shifting feels less random now, as if every grain has found its place. Even the Nile, faint in the distance, sounds like it's flowing in perfect meter, each ripple a note in a cosmic song. You let yourself sink into his rhythm. Your thoughts slow. The chaos of Set, the grief of Isis, the stillness of Osiris, All of it is now just lines in Thoth's great ledger, written down so you don't need to carry them. He's keeping the record. You're allowed to rest. The ibis-headed god glances at you once, as though making sure you understand. You don't have to hold the weight of memory. That's his job. You only need to exist here, in this quiet stretch of night, with your breathing soft, your eyes heavy, your body folding into the desert's cool embrace. And as you walk on, you hear the scratch of his quill fading behind you. Not harsh, not hurried, but steady. A sound like sand brushing stone, like the faintest whisper of papyrus rustling. The sound of memory itself, keeping watch long after you've drifted beyond it. You leave Thoth's steady scratching quill behind, and the night grows strangely warm, as if the stars themselves lean closer. The sand beneath your feet glows faintly gold, and the darkness takes on a softer, more radiant hue. You're stepping now into the realm of Ra, the sun god, even though the world is still wrapped in night. It feels odd at first. Ra belongs to daylight, to blazing skies and burning horizons. But in myth, he doesn't vanish when the sun sets. He sails into the underworld, guiding his solar bark through rivers of shadow, battling chaos each night so he can rise again at dawn. And so, even now, even here, you sense him, steady, bright, though cloaked in quiet. You picture him in his great golden boat, drifting across the darkness. The hull gleams faintly, light pulsing from it like a heartbeat. Around him, stars scatter like sparks. He is falcon-headed too, crowned with a shining solar disk, yet in this sleepy vision he isn't fierce. He simply sails, patient, carrying the promise of tomorrow. You walk as though along the riverbank, your footsteps matching the rhythm of his oars. The Nile glimmers faintly in the distance, reflecting his hidden voyage. And you think, perhaps that's why the Egyptians loved him so deeply. Not just because he blazed across the day, but because he never stopped. He traveled through the night, through danger, so the world would wake again in light. Odd details drift into your thoughts. How Ra was said to age as the sun itself aged, growing older each night, reborn each morning as a child, then maturing again through the day. Imagine the sun yawning as a newborn at dawn, striding proudly by noon, and dozing into old age by dusk. An endless cycle of weariness and renewal, not unlike your own. Scholars still argue how Ra's myth blended with others, whether he merged with Horus to become Ra Haqeeqi, or with Amun to form Amun-Ra. But in the hush of this night, those debates dissolve. He is simply Ra, the one who rises, the one who rests, the one who returns. You tilt your head back, and for a moment, the stars shimmer like oars splashing through water. You hear the faint murmur of the solar boat sliding past, the creak of its timbers, the sigh of waves lapping gently at its side. No clash, no fire, just the slow drift of a vessel carrying light across shadow. The desert feels warmer now, as though Ra's glow lingers in every grain of sand. You take a breath and imagine it filling you, not like a harsh noon blaze, but like a blanket of soft golden warmth. It spreads through your chest, down your arms, into your fingertips. A reminder that light doesn't need to blind. Sometimes it just glows quietly, enough to keep the dark from swallowing everything. You follow his boat for a while, not needing to see it clearly. You trust it's there, sailing steadily, carrying its eternal cargo. And with that trust, your steps grow slower, heavier, like your body itself is joining the cycle of night and dawn. Somewhere above, Ra's falcon eyes watch, but they don't pierce. They soothe. They promise that the morning will return, just as it always has, just as it always will. And so you walk on, wrapped in that golden hush, until even the thought of sunrise feels like a lullaby. The warmth of Ra fades into the background, and the desert shifts again, cooler, more mysterious. The stars overhead glisten like jewels, and the horizon stretches wider, swallowing sound. You sense the presence of another force, darker than Ra's steady light, but not frightening. This is Anubis's realm. He arrives not with thunder but with silence. The jackal-headed god stands at the edge of the sand, lean and tall, ears pricked, eyes gleaming faintly gold in the night. His presence is still, watchful, almost clinical. Anubis doesn't rage or weep. He waits. He measures. He guides. You imagine him stepping out of the shadows, carrying the scales of Ma'at. One side holds a feather, pure and weightless. The other waits for a human heart. It sounds grim at first, this judgment of the dead, but under his calm gaze, it feels oddly comforting. The feather never trembles. The scales never rush. Everything has its time. You take a slow breath, and in your mind, you place your own heart upon the balance. It beats gently, matching the rhythm of your breathing. The feather rests opposite, still, patient. Anubis doesn't frown, doesn't glare. He simply tilts his head, as though listening to the echo of your pulse in the desert night. Odd details about him flicker in your thoughts. In earlier myths, before Osiris became lord of the underworld, Anubis was the one who ruled there. Later, he became the embalmer, wrapping bodies in linen, protecting them for the long journey beyond. Imagine that, the jackal god, carefully, almost tenderly, tucking each soul into their wrappings, ensuring they weren't lost. Not terrifying. Gentle. Like a guardian tucking someone into bed. Scholars still argue whether his jackal form came from the desert scavengers who prowled graves, or whether the Egyptians gave him that shape to protect the tombs from them. Either way, it worked. In your mind, you see him pacing the edges of burial grounds, keeping watch while the sands shift around him, ears always sharp, eyes always glowing faintly. The night grows quieter the longer you picture him. His scales fade, replaced by the soft swish of linen, the faint scent of resin and herbs. You imagine lying on a stone slab, cool and still, while Anubis works in silence. His hands are steady, precise, never rushing. Each movement is careful, deliberate, as though you are being wrapped not for loss but for preservation, kept safe until morning comes. The desert wind hums like a low chant, and the stars above blink slower, heavier, as if nodding off. You realize that judgment, in this moment, feels less like a threat and more like release. The feather balances, the heart rests, and Anubis nods. Not in condemnation, but in acceptance. He steps back into the shadows, but his presence doesn't vanish. You can feel him lingering, a guardian at the threshold of sleep, ears pricked to keep away what might disturb your rest. Jackal-headed, golden-eyed, forever patient. He waits so you don't have to. He keeps watch so you can drift. The scales fade back into the night, and with Anubis watching silently from the edges, you walk deeper into the desert's quiet embrace. The air feels lighter now, almost musical, as though each grain of sand hums with a hidden note. You sense joy lingering here, something bright yet gentle. Heather drifts into view. She arrives like a soft melody. You don't see her immediately. You feel her, like the faint pluck of strings on a harp, like laughter carried on the breeze. And then the image forms. Heather, crowned with the horns of a cow, the solar disk nestled between them. Her eyes shimmer warm as honey, her smile wide, unhurried. She is the goddess of love, music, beauty, and joy, but in this quiet night she feels more like a lullaby than a festival. The sound of distant sistrums, those sacred rattles shaken in her honor, tinkles through the dark. The rhythm is slow, steady, hypnotic. Each shake softens the edges of the night, brushing away any leftover shadows. You walk toward her, and the desert brightens, not with light but with mood. The sand glows faintly pink, the air sweet as if perfumed with lotus. Heather stretches her arms as if to gather the whole world into an embrace, and you almost step right into it. Her presence is soft, maternal, playful. Like a friend coaxing you to smile when you didn't realize you needed it. Odd details slip into your mind. How Heather was called Mistress of the West, welcoming the dead into the afterlife with music and sweetness. How she was sometimes pictured as a cow herself, nurturing, abundant, feeding the living with her milk. Not a fierce goddess, but a comforting one, whose power lay in warmth, not wrath. Scholars still argue whether she began as a sky goddess before taking on her later roles, but tonight she doesn't need labels. She simply exists as joy embodied, the kind that doesn't demand attention, the kind that wraps you like a blanket until you forget what weighed on you in the first place. The music swells faintly, a soft rhythm of rattles and harp strings. You let it wash over you, your steps falling into time with it. Each note feels like a brushstroke on your skin, smoothing tension, coaxing your shoulders to drop, your breath to deepen. Heather hums along with it, her voice low, rich, like a river of honey flowing straight into your ears. You close your eyes, and her sound lingers inside you. Not loud, not overwhelming. Just present. Just enough to remind you that beauty and kindness were also part of these myths, not just battles and grief. That joy, even gentle joy, was seen as divine. You picture lying down under her gaze, her horns arching above like a crescent cradle, the solar disk glowing faintly like a nightlight. She leans close, humming, the rattle of her sistrum blending with the heartbeat of the desert itself. And slowly, everything around you blurs into music. The dunes sway like dancers, the stars flicker in rhythm, the Nile far off beats like a drum. And in that moment, Heather isn't just a goddess. She is sleep itself, sweet, irresistible, coaxing you deeper and deeper until you can't help but let go. Heather's music fades, like the last notes of a lullaby drifting into silence. The desert grows still again, but now it feels heavier, quieter. Something solemn hovers over the sands, as though the ground itself holds its breath. You sense another presence stepping forward, not playful, not radiant, but steady, grave. It is Osiris. He emerges not with grandeur but with dignity. You picture him wrapped tightly in white linen, his green skin glowing faintly beneath the moonlight, the crook and flail crossed over his chest. His crown rises high, white with tall plumes, and his gaze is distant, heavy with knowledge. The air around him thickens, calm but unyielding, like the quiet of a sealed tomb. Osiris is the god of the afterlife, yes, but he is also renewal, rebirth, the green that sprouts even after the Nile's floods. Standing before him, you feel both endings and beginnings pressed into one figure. He doesn't move much. He doesn't need to. His stillness carries weight. You almost sway beneath it. A peculiar detail nudges into your mind. The Egyptians believed Osiris had once been a king, a living man murdered by his jealous brother Set, dismembered and scattered. His wife Isis gathered his body, pieced him together, breathed him back into life. From then on, he ruled the dead. Imagine that. Your king, returned not for vengeance but for guidance, patient and eternal. Scholars still argue whether his myth was rooted in the cycles of crops and floods, or whether he was an ancient memory of a deified ruler. But in this quiet desert night, those debates fade. What remains is the sensation of Osiris simply existing, still, watchful, waiting for you to exhale into his silence. You walk closer, and the sand feels softer, cooler, almost damp beneath your feet, as if you're nearing the banks of the Nile. You imagine reeds whispering nearby, papyrus rustling in the breeze. The land of the dead was not barren, the Egyptians said, but fertile, green, a mirror of the living world. Under Osiris's rule, the afterlife was not horror, it was harvest. You close your eyes and feel his presence wrapping around you like linen. Not suffocating, but preserving. Keeping you intact. His crook and flail glint faintly, symbols of rulership, of guidance and control, yet his face is calm, endlessly calm, like stone worn smooth by centuries of river water. The night deepens. You let yourself imagine lying beside him in a chamber lit only by flickering oil lamps. The walls painted with stars, the ceiling dark as night, the floor cool beneath your body. Osiris doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His silence is enough. His stillness becomes contagious, flowing into your chest, slowing your breath, stilling your thoughts. You realize he is less a god of death than of patience. He teaches you the art of resting, of surrendering to cycles larger than yourself. Just as crops die and rise again, just as the Nile floods and recedes, so too does your mind dip into sleep, only to wake renewed. The linen wraps tighter around your imagination. Your body feels heavier, pressed into the sands of eternity. You are not lost. You are preserved. You are not judged. You are held. And Osiris, unmoving, eternal, watches over you with the certainty of the earth itself. Osiris remains in the background, his silence lingering like a slow echo, but the desert begins to stir again. The air grows sharper, restless, the sands shifting as though something larger prowls beneath the surface. You sense a crackle of energy, heavier than Ra's fire and sharper than Anubis's stillness. From the storm of sand rises Set. Set does not glide or hum. He storms in. His form is strange, his head long and squared, ears pointed, snout curved, an animal shape that doesn't quite match any living creature. Egyptians called it the Set animal, and even today scholars still argue whether it was based on a donkey, a jackal, or something entirely imagined. But under the starlight, his shape is unmissable, powerful, unsettling, raw. You feel the desert change around him. The air thickens with tension, the wind gusts harder, and dunes shift restlessly as though they too are nervous. Set is chaos personified, god of storms, deserts, violence. His story is infamous. Brother to Osiris, murderer of Osiris, forever cast as the rival. Yet here in the still night, his presence feels complicated. He is not just destruction. The Egyptians also saw him as necessary. He was the one who defended Ra's sun boat against the monstrous serpent Apophis, hacking at chaos so the sun could rise. Without Set, light would fail. Without Set, the endless serpent would devour all. Imagine that, the villain who is also the protector. You watch him grip his spear, tall and fierce, standing against an invisible darkness. His shoulders roll with restless energy, his gaze sharp, darting like lightning. His steps are not measured like Osiris's, not soft like Hathor's. They pound the ground, demanding attention. Even in this sleepy desert night, you can feel the jolt of his power pressing against your chest. Odd details circle your mind. In some versions, he wasn't always a villain. Once, he was honored as Lord of the Desert, a vital balance against fertile lands. His domain was harsh, yes, but it was also protective, necessary for strength. Chaos and order weren't enemies, they were partners. Only later, when myths shifted, did Set become the perpetual outcast. You breathe deeper, matching the rhythm of the storm he stirs. The wind whips against your ears, but it doesn't frighten you. Instead, it sharpens you. It makes your senses clearer, your thoughts more awake. before slowly wearing you out, like a sandstorm that exhausts itself and fades. Set turns toward you, his strange face unreadable. His eyes burn with something fierce, not quite anger, not quite pity. Just fire, relentless and untamed. He doesn't linger long. He is not the god who tucks you into bed or hums lullabies. He is the one who rattles the walls before you finally collapse into stillness. The storm before the calm. And so, as he fades into the swirling dark, the desert falls quiet again. The sands smooth out, the winds soften. Your heartbeat, once quickened, now slows. Set has shaken you awake only to let you fall harder into rest. Chaos passes, order returns, and the night continues. The storm of Set settles, leaving behind a strange hush. The sands are smoother now, almost polished, as though the chaos swept everything clean. Into this clarity comes another presence, gentle, steady, endlessly patient. Isis steps into view. You see her outlined against the starry sky, a throne-shaped crown upon her head, her long gown trailing into the sand. Her face is calm, luminous, her gaze steady as though she's watching every detail of the night. She doesn't stride or storm. She glides, her movements measured like a soft tide against the shore. Isis is the goddess of magic, of motherhood, of restoration. And tonight, she feels like the thread that ties everything together. She was the one who found Osiris after Set scattered him, the one who pieced him back, the one who whispered life into him again. Without her, there would be no afterlife, no Osiris, no comfort in death. You imagine her bending over the pieces of her husband, her hands glowing faintly as she murmurs ancient words. Her patience stretches beyond human measure. Day after day, she searched, gathered, wept, and still carried on. Not in anger. In devotion. She embodies persistence that feels eternal. Odd details slip into your thoughts. Isis was so revered that her worship spread far beyond Egypt, lasting into Roman times and even beyond, centuries after other gods had faded. Her temples stood far across the Mediterranean, her name whispered in places where the Nile never flowed. Scholars still argue whether her enduring power came from her magic or from her role as the ultimate mother figure, one who protects no matter how dark the night becomes. As you stand before her, the desert shifts again. It feels warmer, softer, the air scented faintly with flowers you didn't notice before. Perhaps lotus. Perhaps papyrus. She lifts a hand, and though she doesn't touch you, you feel it. A reassurance, a promise that nothing is truly lost, not as long as memory and love endure. You picture her with her son, Horus, the falcon-headed child she raised alone after Osiris's death. Imagine her hiding him from Set, protecting him in the marshes, whispering lullabies while crocodiles swam past. A goddess, yes, but also a mother rocking her baby to sleep. The image is both divine and achingly human. The desert hums with her quiet strength. You feel it settle into your bones, that patience, that soft persistence. It's not loud like Set, not brilliant like Ra, not still like Osiris. It's something else entirely, an undercurrent that holds everything steady, even when the winds rage and the sands shift. You let her presence sink into you. Your breath deepens, your shoulders soften, your mind drifts. Isis doesn't need to lull you with music or overwhelm you with silence. She simply sits nearby, a guardian, a healer, a reminder that even in the darkest myths, there was always someone weaving things back together. And with her near, you find yourself loosening, slowly unraveling, as though the weight of the day is being lifted stitch by stitch. Isis lingers at the edge of your vision, her patience woven into the sand, but the desert shifts once again. The stars overhead scatter into sharper patterns, as though the sky itself wants to introduce someone new. A faint cry cuts through the night, a high, piercing call that echoes like a falcon's wings slicing the air. You look up, and Horus descends. He lands tall and proud, falcon-headed, his eyes glowing the color of the horizon at dawn. There is power in his stance, but not the chaotic storm of Set or the heavy silence of Osiris. Horus carries something different, clarity. He feels like the crisp edge of morning light, a reminder that the night cannot last forever. You recall his story, the son of Isis and Osiris, hidden as a child, raised in the shadows, then brought forth to challenge Set. Their battles were legendary, stretching across myths like endless chess games. Sometimes he won, sometimes he faltered, but always he returned, steady and determined. He was not just a fighter, he was persistence embodied. Odd details circle in your mind. In certain myths, Horus lost an eye during the struggle with Set, only to have it restored, becoming the famous Eye of Horus, a symbol of healing, protection, wholeness. You imagine that glowing eye hovering in the sky above, not threatening, but watching, guarding, a divine nightlight over the weary traveler. Scholars still argue whether Horus's myth was primarily political, an echo of real dynastic struggles between rulers, or whether he was always a symbol of cosmic balance. But under this starry desert sky, the debates feel irrelevant. What matters is the sensation of standing under his gaze, safe, guarded, steady. Horus doesn't speak, but his wings spread wide. You feel a rush of air sweep past you, crisp and cool, brushing your skin like the soft flap of a bird at dawn. He circles above, his shadow tracing slow arcs over the dunes, calming and repetitive. Like a pendulum, his flight rocks your thoughts into rhythm, each pass smoothing your mind. You picture lying in the sand, watching him soar. His eye glows faintly, a beacon against the stars, reminding you that even if shadows linger, there is always light returning. His falcon cry softens, lower, steadier, blending into the night like a lullaby only birds could sing. The desert feels broader with him above, the horizon stretching further, the stars sharper. Yet instead of making you restless, it makes you smaller, safer, like a child tucked under the vast sky, watched over by something strong enough to protect you from all that could go wrong. As he circles slower and slower, your eyelids mirror his pace. Each blink feels heavier, each breath deeper. Horus remains above, a sentinel of the night, ensuring nothing disturbs the calm Isis began weaving. He is the eye, the guardian, the steady rhythm that carries you towards sleep without a single word. Horus fades into the horizon, his wings dissolving into the endless night sky. The desert breathes again, slower now, as if preparing to close its long tail. But one final presence steps forward, a figure both feared and revered, a creature with the body of a lion, the haunches of a hippopotamus, the jaws of a crocodile. Ammit. You don't hear her arrive, you sense her. The ground feels heavier beneath your feet, the air dense, as though every grain of sand weighs a little more. Ammit is no goddess of light or laughter. She is the devourer, the one who waits beside Anubis's scales. If a heart tips heavier than the feather of Ma'at, she does not hesitate. She consumes. At first, her image is sharp, frightening. Those jaws, that bulk, the hybrid of predators combined into one relentless form. But as you stand before her, a strange calm overtakes you. She is not cruel. She does not chase or claw. She only waits. She has patience equal to Anubis, but hers is edged with finality. Odd details flicker in your mind. The Egyptians didn't consider Ammit a goddess to be worshipped. She was a force, an inevitability. To them, she represented what happens when balance is broken, when the heart grows too heavy with wrongdoing. Not a punishment, exactly, just consequence. Scholars still argue whether she was seen as evil or simply necessary, but in this desert night, her presence feels less monstrous and more natural. Like a reminder that sleep itself is a kind of surrender, a letting go. She doesn't hunt. She doesn't judge. She simply consumes what is too heavy to rise. You step closer in your imagination, and she lowers her crocodile jaw, watching. You almost expect fear to spike through you, but instead, you feel oddly relieved. To let go of what is too heavy, to surrender it to her, means you are lighter. Freer. She eats only the burdens, the heaviness, the guilt. What remains floats, feather-like. You imagine placing your worries into her mouth one by one. Each anxious thought, each stubborn regret, each heavy stone you've carried all day. She chomps once, twice, and it is gone. Not with drama, not with cruelty, but with practicality. The desert grows lighter each time she swallows. The silence around you deepens, profound and almost sacred. Amit curls into the sand, her massive form settling as though she is content, her duty complete. She does not linger to threaten. She lies still, like a guardian who has done her work. And as she rests, so do you. The ground feels softer, the night quieter, your mind lighter. What was heavy is gone. What remains drifts like a feather in the desert breeze, ready to float into sleep. The desert quiet is now complete. Ra's fiery glow has long since faded, Anubis's watchful scales rest in the shadows, Hathor's music lingers like a memory, and Osiris still waits in calm silence. Set's storm has passed. Isis's steady patience holds the edges of the night together, Horus circles high above, and Amit lies curled in the sand, content. The myths have all stepped forward, one by one, and now they settle back into the fabric of the dark. You walk alone across the dunes, though not truly alone. Each figure you met leaves a trace. The warmth of Ra rests in your chest, a slow ember. The stillness of Anubis lingers in your breath. Hathor's music hums at the edge of hearing. Osiris's patience presses gently against your shoulders. Set's storm has left you calmer, Isis's touch steadier, Horus's eye protective, Amit's hunger oddly reassuring. All together, they weave a tapestry of presence around you. Odd details drift like stars overhead. You remember how Egyptians wrapped their dead in linen, how they decorated tombs with paintings of daily life, as though eternity itself was just another day extended. You recall the Eye of Horus symbol scratched into amulets, worn to ward off harm. You even think of scholars still arguing about the roots of these myths, debating whether gods like Osiris or Set began as ancient kings, later raised to divine status. And yet, none of that debate matters under the desert sky. Here, the myths feel alive, not as stories in a book, but as companions in silence. The air cools. The dunes stretch further, their edges soft, their slopes inviting. You lie back against the sand, staring up at the endless ceiling of stars. They blink slowly, lazily, like eyelids drifting shut. The night has no urgency anymore. It only waits for you to surrender into it. Your breathing falls into rhythm with the desert itself. Long inhale, like the tide of the Nile. Long exhale, like the wind sweeping across the dunes. Everything has slowed. The myths have done their part. Now there is only you, the stars, and the hush of sand whispering around your body. The gods recede fully into memory. Their forms dissolve, leaving behind only impressions, warmth, patience, music, silence. Even chaos, now muted, feels like part of the calm. The desert doesn't need you to move. It only needs you to rest. And so you let your eyes close, the weight of stories fading into weightless dreams. The myths of Egypt tuck themselves back into the night, and the night tucks you into itself. Like and share this video with others and subscribe our YouTube channel for walking more video.